Welcome to the second talk of the Unlocking the Digital Humanities series. On Monday, some of you already visited Professor Crane's talk. This is a series that is in two spaces at once, in a virtual space and also in this physical space here. There are some colleagues directly watching it from Leipzig, but everything is also streamed to YouTube. So potentially a worldwide audience, but also a recording for later. So if you want to revisit some points in this talk or any other talks of this series, you can do that at your leisure. I'm Thomas Koentges. I'm assistant professor in Leipzig at the Digital Humanities department, led by Professor Crane. And I'm currently visiting Tufts University for a few months, helping Professor Crane out in the Thucydides class, and also trying to do something about the series. I should say that I'm not a computer scientist. I'm now assistant professor in computer science, but I actually did my PhD in Latin literature. And I'm interested particularly in textual transmission. But now, lately, I get more and more interested in what can you know about a text without actually reading it. We will maybe talk about this either today or in one of the other talks as well. In this talk, Digital Humanities, everything you wanted to know but haven't yet asked, I try to anticipate some of the questions you may have and try to answer them as good as I can. If I forget any questions, or if there's a question that I haven't answered and you haven't asked, just feel free to ask it. We will leave some time for discussion in the end on purpose. In order that we actually have some time at the end, we should probably just start with the first question. And it's a bit of a big one. So what is digital humanities? On the talk on Monday, Professor Crane also already mentioned various wars in Europe. This is probably another one. People are not really agreeing on what digital humanities really is. Here we have a drawing of what digital humanities is. It's very it's a good overview, I guess, and it's pretty much all or nothing. So we have, it's everything. It's all-encompassing. We have philosophy, computer science, linguistics, sociology, history, literature of arts. They're all in the methodological commons, and then they're doing database design, text analysis, numerical analysis, music retrieval and analysis, and imaging processing, whatever that means. This was done in the 80s, and we will talk about this as well. You could ask Google, you could say, what is digital humanities? And you will get answers like, what is digital humanities and what is it doing in English departments? Or what is digital humanities and what is it doing in the library? So the library would be common ground if you would ask this question in German, but the autocomplete in Germany would probably be, what is digital humanities and what is doing in German departments, or what is digital humanities and what's doing it in history departments. So it's as Professor Crane laid out on Monday, it is a very, very national discipline. The big humanities worldwide that are tapping into digital humanities are mainly the national humanities disciplines. So it's English in English-speaking countries, German in German-speaking countries. And then there's some common things like classics or history and so on where they're tapping into it. The reason why this is an autocomplete, though, is that this is also the article, the name of an article written by Kirschenbaum. Yeah, and that's quite interesting. And he gives a definition that also demonstrates how knowledge in the digital world actually works. This is an old Wikipedia article, old Wikipedia entry from the website in Wikipedia Digital Humanities. It doesn't exist anymore. It only exists in the quotation by Kirschenbaum and the quotation of the quotation. but the article itself has been changed. And you could, of course, go into the history of the article and retrieve it, but that would be rather complicated. So he says the digital humanities, or Wikipedia says, according to Kirschenbaum, the digital humanities, also known as humanities computing, is field of study, research, teaching, and invention with the intersection of computing and humanities. It is methodological by nature and interdisciplinary in scope. So what does this mean? Does it mean that digital humanities is just a method? Some people really think that, and that's not a bad approach. It's a valid approach. It's one of the 800 different definitions of what digital humanities is. But the article actually goes further and says it studies how these media affect the discipline in which they are used and what these disciplines have to contribute to our knowledge of computing. And that's the thing. Digital humanities as a discipline asks questions that no other discipline asks. And that's pretty much a definition what then could make an academic discipline, and not only a method or not only a tool set. I like this one. I really like this quotation. I think that's probably the reason why it has been quoted over and over and over again. But some other people try to define stuff as well. Riley Simmons from Columbia, Victoria University of British Columbia up in Canada. So digital humanities is the study of various humanities through the use of computational techniques and so on. You could actually spend a whole day by reading. Now I have to probably, sorry, working with two screens. By reading all the different definitions of digital humanities. So this website, digitalhumanities.com, actually generates, every time you refresh it, a new definition for digital humanities. And it's not any definition of digital humanities. This is actually from the day of the age. There were 500 people, 500 scholars that are active in digital humanities, asked to actually try to come up with a definition. And then it grew, it was published on GitHub and extended and so on. So people were letting it grow, and it's now over 800 definitions in different languages. And so what do you do with those definitions? Well, I'm now in the age, so why not the age, digital humanities? This is just an engram here of for the comparison of digital humanities and humanities computing. Just to see what is more common up to 2000, we say that humanities computing is a bit more common. And this is only solely in this presentation because there can't be a DH presentation without an engram here. Yeah, it's law actually. And I'm very serious as a German. I have to follow the rules of digital humanities. There can also be a digital humanities presentation without a word cloud. Yeah? So this is a word cloud based, taking away digital humanities words, and then what those 800 definitions actually say. The problem with it is I actually tried to do a little bit more precise analysis of all these 800 definitions using topic modeling. The problem is that there are 800 definitions, but they all repeat themselves very, very, very much. So digital humanities in the end is doing stuff. It's methodological, but it also answers questions. So at least some people, we have some intersubjective agreement, even if people still like to fight and still like to discuss what digital humanities is. One additional definition I would really, really like to stress, though, is that Stephen Ramsay's definitions, who says, personally, I think digital humanities is about building things. And that is one good thing as well. So it's not only about research, it's also about building collection, building methods, combining those, trying to create something new, very creatively, in that way. So I've shown you words, I've shown you text, and if you deal with digital humanities, you might actually ask the question, is DH just text stuff? Do I actually have to care if I'm coming from art history, musicology, philosophy, whatever? Is the age really just tech stuff? Well, it's a good concern. I mean, in the beginning was the word, in the age as well. So the history of digital humanities is text-based, really, really text-based. So it started in probably the father, pardon the pun, of digital humanities, his father, Roberto Buser. In 1949, he actually came up with the corpus of Thomas of Aquinas online. 11 million Latin words on IBM punch cards. Yeah. So if you say digital humanities might be a thing, but it's new and I'm too old to learn new tricks, the thing is now 70 years old almost. Yeah. So that's where it pretty much started. It was sponsored by IBM and Thomas J. Watson, and still exists. And there are a lot of Italian scholars who are still working on a new version of the Thomas of Aquinas corpus and try to make it more accessible. There are things like, also completely text-based, things like two-step. Has anyone heard of two-step? No one? Okay. Two-step is a really great thing developed by the University of Tübingen, and it's still used. Yeah, it's one of the first things where people were thinking of how can we actually program a text editor that deals with a lot of different signs, with a lot of different problems, with language, language dependent and language independent problems. And because it was a Unix system, it was built on completeness, verifiability, stability, and consistency. And these are still things that are really important. More or less, hopefully more important, and even more important if you try to do real research. And that's the reason why two-step is still around. Unfortunately, since a few years, not in active development, and there are good reasons why you can switch to other things now, but two-step was a major player in digital humanities and how to process text and how to deal with text and influence it a lot. And then there are, of course, big projects like the Tufts' very own Perseus project, founded 30 years ago. Yeah, gosh, you're older than I think. Sorry. 12 years old. Yeah, so, this is just now we have over 1 billion words of Latin, not only 11 million on punch cards, over 1 billion accessible of Latin and Greek accessible in all kinds of formats. But this is also still text, and one of the bigger digital humanities societies, the European Association for Digital Humanities, wasn't always named European Association for Digital Humanities. It was the ALLC, the Association for Literary and Linguistic Computation. Yeah. So even that is a very, very strong indication how tightly connected the history of the age is with the history of computational linguistics, text research, using text. Derrida would be very happy. There's nothing outside the text. But of course, we now know that there is actually also a lot of things outside the text. Don't want to bash French philosophers. Please don't bash me for that. But it's there's maybe a little bit more to knowledge than just text-based knowledge. And also, it's a willfully misinterpretation of Derrida. Anyway, we can discuss it afterwards. So the ALLC actually had a reason to switch the name from ALLC to EHD. They wanted to encompass not only text analysis and language corpora, but also history, art history, music, manuscript studies, image processing, and electronic editions. I actually don't know, I don't understand how manuscript studies and electronic editions is not text analysis and language corpora. But I think there's an argument for this and against it. But the good thing is they want to widen their scope. They gave their new name to widen the scope of what they're actually doing, what they're researching. And that's a good thing. that they just put the names in it and don't describe what they're actually doing is also showing that the field doesn't really know how to deal with this. We're not 100% sure how we can actually deal with images in a meaningful way to directly generate knowledge. We're not 100% sure and certain how we can deal music in a meaningful way to generate knowledge just by using images, just by using musical scores, without using textual description. That's a challenge. Yeah. And the question is if we, if this is possible at all, but I mean, we can certainly try to get knowledge out of this. And the biggest sector, the biggest growing sector that is not only text-based in digital humanities is probably the GLAM sector. It's a galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. If you remember the Google slide I showed at the beginning of this talk, there was about what is digital humanities and what is doing in a library. So galleries, libraries, archives, museums are collection-based, trying to maintain collections and trying to offer collections to a broader and broader audience is a very big challenge. You have to deal with the metadata properly, you have to try to connect things properly, you have curatorial aspects, how many people are allowed to access the item I have in my catalog, and also how can I make people more aware about the items that I have in my collection. So there's outreach reasons, curatorial reasons, and in general, collection building and connecting of information is the reason why this GLAM sector is getting stronger and stronger in the age. So in some, I wouldn't exclude, I don't know about a DH department that is in a library science institute, but I wouldn't exclude that. That would be a possibility. And that's also not new. The Museum Computer Network was already founded in 1967, and they deal with questions like that, and that's actually quite refreshing to see. I should disclose though that most of their research is also still text-based. So they look at the metadata, which is text, look at the description, which is text, and do not so much yet with the images and the music itself. But they do certainly think about like this. So here we have the Library of the Future web page, and they're thinking how they deal with all the societal challenges society throws us in. How do they deal with aging advances? We're all becoming older and older, and we'll spend more time of our life not working and be bored and having to go to a library than before. We try to do connected learning, data everywhere. There's some weird stuff in here as well, but it's good that they're asking questions like this in order to find out where libraries are going. And they also color-coded them a little bit. So if you want to revisit it, you can do this quite easily. But it's not only about questions like this, it's also about how you experience images and how you experience art. This is one of my favorite paintings. I mean, I'm a language researcher, so the Tower of Babel is quite an important one for me. And I was quite impressed when I saw it in Vienna. But not everybody can go to Vienna. And if I want to go too close to this painting in order to see more detail, I would also cause an alarm in the museum. And you say, well, who's so stupid causing an alarm in a museum? I did this, not there, but before. Yeah? So it's a real concern to me. Just by pointing out the difference between Doric and Ionic columns, I triggered the alarm in one of the Leipzig museums. But the good thing is, in order to see something really good nowadays and see something in detail, something like the Google Art project has been done. This painting is not that big, so it's maybe that wide. Yeah, you saw it. And if I want to know, hey, what did those people actually say while they were constructing the stuff, the Tower of Babel? Is there anything funny happening here among the construction workers? I can actually zoom in as close as I couldn't on a normal physical painting. And I can now go as, if I would be that close in an archive, in a museum, I would trigger an alarm. So this is not digital humanities. This is trying to building up your collection and opening your collection in a way. But what it does, it raises questions about the original and the avatar. What can I do with the original? What can I do with the avatar? What is better to do with the original? What is better to do with the avatar? Yeah? When I work on manuscripts, I find it important to see some of the manuscripts in person. It's quite a funny term, but directly lying in front of me to get a first impression. This interaction of me and the manuscript is a quick date, maybe 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, definitely not more than an afternoon. Then I go back and look for hours and hours and hours on digital images, because I can do stuff, I can modify, I can manipulate the image in a way that it actually tells me more. Similar textual research is based on analysis and synthesis. And so analysis is nothing else but trying to take the text apart. And then where you actually do your research is trying to build it back together. And that's what you're doing in textual research. You're manipulating the words on the book in front of you. And if it's only in your head, but you do them. Now you can actually have the physical means to do that also with images in a better way. I find this amazing. So, I mean, you probably know this one. And my wife is an art historian, and she teaches me new things every time. I find it amazing how Sora just made the 3-meter painting just by using tiny dots and splashes of paint. Yeah? And that's an effect you won't get in an art gallery. Yeah. Then you won't get this amazement by looking on your computer screen. Yeah. I know that it doesn't look amazing, it looks more attractive, but I'm German. That's German amazement. Yeah. Yeah. So the other stuff. So the University of California of San Diego is actually trying to research images solely based on the images. So that was, I think, a research from 2012 funded by the NEH. And they were looking on 1 million mangas using supercomputers and trying to cluster them and compare them based on their style. Yeah? This is 1 million images visualized. Yeah? Not all of them are black and white. They had to render them gray because that was the only way the supercomputer could actually handle to visualize and to render 1 million images. But if you zoom in, if you look at smaller things, you can actually see that they actually are colorful. And you can do this zooming and so on. And you can see for common trends, you can see what is done, why it's something done. Of course, there's the question, where do we go with that? But that's one of the exciting questions. I mean, it's only because 70% of the people like blue as a color doesn't mean that suddenly a computer is generating pictures that are maybe blue in order to do artwork. But there are other stuff that can be deduced from trends like this. And we are just starting out pretty much on that one. But that is definitely one of the future questions of digital humanities. Something what people often forget, when we think of digital humanities or humanities computing, we always only think how computer science actually influences humanities. And we very rarely are aware of the fact that this is also a reciprocal process where humanities also influence computer science. Today, I'm flying out to the University of Maryland and will deal with Persian. I don't know anything about Persian, classical Persian, well, not enough to actually make sense out of the result of my algorithms. But there's another person who actually knows that, and then I can actually make my algorithm better adapted to the language-dependent features Persian has to offer in order to then apply it. And what we also don't forget is examples like this. The humanities are strongly influencing computing. So here we have a work from Don Howard, University of Notre Dame, a code of ethics for the human-robot interaction profession. Yeah, that is important. Yeah, what was the movie called? That was Ex Machina. Who has seen the movie Ex Machina? One. It's a great movie, and after you've seen the movie, you actually really know why this is really, really important. And it always sounds a lot like science fiction, but it's actually not so far from away. Yeah, far from away. Machine learning becomes better and better. Yeah, I mean, just this year, computers started beating very strong human Go players in Go. Yeah, so and Go is a very, very creative game that is very hard to play for a machine. And we don't say we are there yet. I mean, humanities is full of questions where we don't really know if it has the answer or not. And we are still not able to resolve some simple questions, some questions where we actually know that there is an answer. My favorite example is chess. Chess is a completely mathematical game, completely mathematical, nothing else involved, but it's not solved. And I think 5 years ago, somebody made an estimation that we probably need 90 years computer running through continuously in order to actually resolve chess. That might change, but at the moment, it's one of the games that is not mathematically resolved, not even soft resolved. There's a difference between hard and soft resolved there. Anyway, right at this point in the talk, you might probably think, interesting, but can I just ignore the age? So I know that probably the mere fact that you came to this talk, or the fact that you're zooming in, clicking on the YouTube link now, or are partaking in the Google Hangout, means that you're actually interested in the age. But there's a lot of pushback. And some of the pushback actually has to do with sometimes with the materiality versus the avatar, but this is also a digital humanities research question in a way. And I know it's always hard to get used to new tools. There's this, I think, Danish comedian one time where showed a small clip where books were invented instead of the scroll anymore. And so how to open a new book or how to open a book is actually quite a handy guide. This is, by the way, not satire. This is a real thing. Yeah, it's a description of how, if you really want to get most of your book, how to open it properly. And it's true, if you want to have it look nicely in your shelf, that's also a good thing. But we won't win a lot of knowledge, generate a lot of knowledge using just books. It's simply not possible. And here's why. We are in the digital age. Yeah? We are not, most of us, I think nobody here is born in the digital age, but we are now living in the digital age. Digital age is beginning 2002. That's when we had more data stored on virtual media than on physical media. So digital media than on analog. So more things stored digitally than analog. That's, by definition, the beginning of the digital era. And that's a lot of data. I mean, in 2012 alone, 2.8 zettabytes. 2.8 zettabytes is 28 with 20 zeros. That's in bytes. Yeah? Have been generated alone. If we would think of, let's count it something that I'm more familiar with, editions of Homer, Iliad and Odyssey. There are 550 editions of Homer per day per human being on this planet. So everybody of you in 2012 wrote as much data as Homer and his two works, Iliad and Odyssey. Yeah? And that's interesting. And of course, most of it is probably not humanities data. Probably 70% of it is surveillance of some kind, not all like governments, and so something is just the surveillance outside and so on. But we also have things like Google Books, we have things like the Perseus project, where billions and billions of words are generated. And one of the things is, what we did so far in humanities always was sampling. I just want to write my PhD thesis about this sentence of Petronius, and I write 100,000 words about it, and I get a PhD. And that's not a bad thing, but why did I choose this sentence? What did make me choose this sentence? Is it that I had full information about everything that there is in that literature? And then I choose, well, this is a very interesting question humanity should answer. No, I choose this sentence having partial information. What big data processes can actually do is actually process the full information, or a lot larger amount of information, to actually find the interesting bit, find the things where I still have to write, to some extent qualitative and traditional methods in order to gain new knowledge. But given that we have this amount of data out there, we really need something to help us sort through it. It's just a mere fact. So sampling always creates bias, and I'm not saying that digital humanities is bias-free. Yeah. So is DH research bias-free if you just said that there's a sampling bias in our humanities research? And I say, of course not. There's all kinds of biases out there. There's data bias. Yeah, we have here the visualization of the Trove newspaper articles by state. And we see that they peaked the First World War. So some researchers might go and see this data and say, well, of course it peaked in the First World War because life was more interesting back then, more things were written. That's of course wrong. Yeah? What we have in this data bias here is a collection bias. Yeah? It's a collection bias 100 years ago, First World War. Where does the money for digitization go? Everything that has something to do with First World War. We can see that directly on our data collection, always. So we have data collection bias. We have visualization bias. Yeah? And the most visualization bias that I always see is something that is just random. The data that is behind it doesn't really matter. What should matter to you is that the colors don't mean anything. So if a visual feature, that doesn't mean anything. If a name is written horizontally or vertically, it doesn't mean anything. Yeah? But it's easier for me to read. The only thing that actually means something that is in the data is the size of the word. That's the only thing that means something. But there are still so many things in a visualization that influence us and influence how we see something. And especially humanities research or researchers in general see something and then they get creative. But it's just coincidence. So it's trying to detect what the visualization bias is, what the collection bias is, or what sometimes algorithm bias is. Yeah. So we have, that is the topic modeling of over 100,000 articles, abstracts of articles published in New Zealand from 2010 to 2014. And I see some kind of cluster here, and then I see one cluster here. And those things are actually not that close together. Yeah? And those things also, if you actually look at the topics, is not that far apart. But the problem is New Zealand articles or New Zealand published articles are bilingual. So these are the articles published in English, and this is Maori, or something that is very close to Maori culture, like the word culture, or trust, or treaty. Yeah? So it's, you can pretty much, sometimes you can use a topic modeling algorithm as the most computationally most expensive way to detect other languages. It's everything that has a high score on this topic would be written in Maori. So what it does, it's a mix of algorithm bias, and it's also a mix of visualization bias, because this 17 topic is so far removed from the rest because it's in a different language that it completely, because of the scale, squishes everything together. Yeah? So I would have to remove topic 17 and then visualize again, and then I would have a bit more trustworthy visualization. So things like this are important, but they're not easy to see. And they're not easy to see by your developers as well, if you don't do the coding yourself. And they're not easy to see by you, because you don't understand the coding. Some of you probably don't really directly understand the coding behind it. So it's something to be very, very careful and be very aware of it. So bias in research is something we always have to address, but I think we now have the means to address it better, to address it clearer, and to address it in a falsifiable way. So but do I need to be able to code? Is probably the next question that is often asked. And I was asked this quite often. As I said, I'm a classicist. Everything I learned in coding, I learned outside of school and outside of university. So my answer is sort of. Yeah? Of course, you can hire developers. Yeah? But I really like these pictures, by the way. It's how I feel myself sometimes. But you should notice when they solve problems creatively. Yeah? So this code says initially get random number, return 4. Yeah? Chosen by fair dice roll, guaranteed to be random. So that is something you should try to notice. I mean, that's an XKCD comic, but I really like this. Yeah, not everything what the name of the function actually does is actually what it does, and you should be able to detect shortcuts. So the minimum requirements, pretty much, for doing digital humanities, if you can't do the coding yourself, you should at least understand the methods applied. Yeah, you should be able to evaluate the results, and you should be able to detect bias. So then you can work in collaboration with computer science, with developers, and so on in a meaningful way. And it's often not done in a meaningful way, especially in the gold rush times of digital humanities. There are a lot of things that that went a bit astray. But this going astray is pretty much just cheating in math. I mean, you can't just write down the result. You have to show you're working. You have to be able to explain your working. When topic modeling came out in 2000, really came out for the humanities in 2005, 2006, people suddenly found out that all novels are written the same way. Of course not. That's not true, and that also doesn't say in the data. It's a misinterpretation. But you have to understand the statistics behind it, or at least show what methods are applied and how they work in order to understand what your result really is. Yeah. So, and if you can't do this, you can still partake in digital humanities and the community. Yeah? You can build open collections of research data. That is very, very meaningful work. It's often done by libraries and archives, of course, but everybody can do it, especially since 1994, yeah? When TEI XML, sorry, it's another text reference, but it's when a TEI came along, which is a very easy markup language that is human readable and machine readable. It's probably nothing new to you. It's new to you, though, probably something to keep in mind, that XML was used as a simplification of SGML, which was all kinds of arcane formats out there. And there's a trend nowadays in the XML community to make it more complicated again, or write another dialect of XML. And that is something people should keep in mind. XML was actually meant as a simplification. And we don't need to make it more complicated. But XML is not the only way. You can write Markdown. As long as you produce open data, I don't care which format you're using. Yeah? As long as there's this data in an open format, so not proprietary format, and then put it accessible online for everybody. And that's how you actually can speed up knowledge in your field as well. So one of the last questions I'm going to ask myself is, where can I get more info? Well, there is the humanist list established in 1987 by the Obi-Wan Kenobi of digital humanities, Willard McCarthy, who also did a nice drawing, by the way, that you saw in the beginning. And he said, repetition is a means of maintaining group memory. Yeah, it's maybe you should make some grammar mistakes in there, so we can say Yoda McCarthy. But that's really important. So people always say, oh, well, that has been researched, that has been done, and so on. But it's actually, humans are not very capable of storing information for quite a long time. Yeah, we tried lots of methods. We tried stone, we tried paper, but it's dealing with textual transmission. I can tell you that all this information storage is very flawed, and the best way to actually share, the best strategies to share knowledge and to make sure that the knowledge reaches the future is to talk about this and share it and use it. That's the only useful strategy out there. You can, of course, ask Google what is digital humanities, and you will get lots of guides, papers, books, monographs, everything. But everybody's trying to answer what is digital humanities. As I said, you can always go to whatisdigitalhumanities.com and read through all the 800 definitions. Or you can continue to come to the series as well. It's next week on Monday, we're talking about combining qualitative and quantitative research methods, where we actually, Melinda Johnston and I, will actually talk about cartoons, New Zealand cartoons, and how you can actually apply textual research to archival data and go through over 100,000 abstracts and 30,000 descriptions in order to generate some data, and then how you can use this data in order to do some qualitative, old-fashioned traditional analysis on this. And then we have the talk of Marie-Claire Beaulieu and Christopher Blackwell about valid and verified undergrad research. They're not just sitting there, they can actually do research. And I don't want to read the same essay every year again and again and again and again. It's boring. Yeah? I want to have undergrads who do exciting research. And if you want to know more, just go to our Google Doc program, where we actually have a lot of more talks. I think it's 11 in total. That is the second, so there's still 9 left. The next talk is still in the introductory group, and then it's more topic specific, and but also very interesting. So, and with this, and still 50 minutes time to ask questions and discussing points, and to have a little view on the Obi-Wan Kenobi of digital humanities, I end my talk. Thank you very much. Questions? Yeah.
So fundamentally, we assume that more and more of the materials of research in the humanities are either born digital or become digital someplace along the way.
Yeah.
What kind of tools do you think are important for humanities scholars to have to manage those digital collections? So you're doing your research and you're collecting a lot of things across multiple media. As we were saying, not just text, but also images. And maybe you create thousands and thousands of these things during the course of your research. As a scholar, what kinds of tools do you need to manage these giant collections of material?
The good thing is you need less and less specialist knowledge to do that. So there are collection management systems out there. I would say 10 years ago, you should have a very good understanding about what doubling core metadata is, or what different ways of storing metadata is. But that is not necessary anymore. Because it's a bit of a global movement to trying to make this all able to talk together. Some standards have been established. And the standards are implemented in a lot of collection management systems or that. One of the best collection management system I find that is currently out there for digital heritage data or humanities data is probably Omeka. It's open source, you can write plugins for it, you can set it up. And once it's set up, you have initial setup costs. Either you do it yourself or you pay a developer for that. But then once it's set up, I can put a research student of any humanities discipline in it, and they can maintain the metadata to each collection item. And it comes with a lot of APIs. API is a way of requesting information directly out of your script or your browser to a collection and then process the information. And Omeka comes already ready to go for some of the APIs. So you can easily, you don't have to spend development costs anymore into developing this. That's another thing, because everybody wants to be the first. There are a lot of development costs into going into developing the same thing over and over again. But I mean, it's still good because we slowly get standards. And that I'm just a big fan of Omeka, but it's there are different options out there as well. Openness, curatorial, also manageable by a non-specific person. Yeah, that's the two things that are important. Yeah.
In terms of archaeological material, how could digital humanities methods be applied to those to make them more accessible online, also quantifiable and searchable?
So, I didn't show friends of us from the University of Library, Angela and Baputis, for example. They have this Digital Heritage Museum. So just Google it. It's a collection of 3D scans of statues, for example. And it's really 3D, so you can turn it around, you can change the lighting and everything in order to actually get more knowledge. And he developed a search form using and 3D scanning sounds very expensive, but it's not anymore. All he uses is an Xbox Kinect. Yeah? So $100 and you have your own 3D scanner. And then he uses the Xbox Kinect as well, and you can now stand in front of your Xbox Kinect, like the statue you're looking for, and the algorithm will bring it up. Yeah. So that's one thing. Another thing is if you deal with manuscripts. If I'm looking at Petronius, I have 60 different manuscripts in all kinds of different countries. And I want this to be accessible. I want to have a look at it. And I can't travel around. In the 19th century, Mommsen sent his students around and say, you go to Barcelona and make a collation of this manuscripts, and you go to Rome and make a collation of this manuscripts, and then you gather all this information. Now I don't have to send students. Yeah? I click, and there's a manuscript, and I can zoom in quite closely and see a lot more detail. I can inverse the colors and see detail I would have never seen in reality. Yeah. So in that sense, you can archaeological reconstructions, for example. In the 19th century, you try to make it look like the original, which is now very difficult because you generated organic matter. So it's you can't really see the difference sometimes what's the reconstruction and what is the original and some of the things. Archaeology in the 20th century has changed to try to make the reconstruction obvious, so everybody sees that's reconstruction, that's the original thing. Now you can just show the original thing and make the reconstruction digital without even harming the original artifact at all. Yeah. The best place for archaeological artifacts of any sites is often in the ground anyway. So dig it out, map it, produce a digital image, put dirt on it. Yeah? Because this preserves knowledge. There were three examples. There are more. Any more? Yeah.
Is there any way digital printing, 3D printing is used?
Well, yes. Because you do the 3D scans, technically you could print it. Yeah. And that's also good. I mean, because you can generate an original-esque experience for the people in your class. You don't have to go to Athens in order to print it out, and it's very. I think what's often very hard to see is dimensions, you wouldn't have a clue how big the Bruegel picture is if you wouldn't have seen me next to it. And That is easier, of course, if you can print on a one-to-one scale an artifact that is that resembles it. But there's, of course, things to the materiality of the original that are still not in the printed copy. So I think for teaching, 3D printing is a good thing. If it does a lot for research, I'm not so sure, because the 3D printed image will be worse than your 3D printed 3D avatar, digital avatar of the 3D scan, and you can do less things with it. Yeah, if you break a digital thing apart and look from both sides, that's fine, but you always have to print out the next thing if you want to break it apart. Yeah, if you want to do the analysis with it. So maybe, I don't know about other examples, but definitely for teaching, and in order for merchandise as well. I think that's also a good thing. Yeah. Other questions? I think we would have time for the follow-up if it's still valid.
I guess my follow-up would be around the obligation that the institution should have to provide to humanists means of securely storing these digital collections and managing them during the course of research. So the institutions I've worked at tend to spend millions and millions of dollars on high-performance computing to support research, which you showed some examples of how high-performance computing can be applied to humanities research. But I guess I'm wondering to what degree you would agree with the premise that the institution also has an obligation, just as they provide you with an office, to provide you with means of securely storing humanities-based multimedia research materials.
Well, the obligation is hard to, I don't want to put any obligation. If I was in a, that is a question we as society have to ask ourselves. So, I mean, we make the decision, given this explosion of data, and that's easier and easier to actually save the data as well. And it's also cheaper and cheaper to actually save the data. It's, I think that I'm storing on this machine a lot more than colleagues would have done 10 or 15 years ago. And Mommsen, when he tried to travel across Germany with another carriage full of his books. But I would like to say yes, but that's an answer every society has to answer for itself. So it's Germany is quite lucky because the government decided that yes, we want to continue to fund the digital shift, and we want to continue to fund humanities disciplines. In America, the difference between NEH and the National Endowment for Science is a bit of a gap. So it's it's definitely a challenge. It's one of the challenges of this century. How do we store all this information and who's responsible for it? And it's definitely something somebody has to answer. I think given that we have GitHub out there and other means of sharing information quite cheaply, I don't know why each of us shouldn't start doing that. So it's if we share the load, so I mean, then it's easier. We don't need the library. We don't need the university to store this information. It's a bit of a demand. So I would like them to do it. Yeah, I would like them to do it. I would like them to do it, but if this proactively.
I think I'm misstating. I agree with you completely. I come from the IT side, so central IT, academic IT, and I feel like I guess I'm trying to validate my sense that this some means for managing digital collections that are actively used in research, and then to preserve those collections, so this small fee, over time after research is completed, maybe provide access to both the code as it is to detect or algorithmic bias possible in the future, and the raw materials. That needs to be a fundamental tool to support research in the humanities, just as high performance computing is to support research in astronomy, for instance.
No, absolutely. And I think libraries have the most expertise, over 1,000 years of expertise in how to store and try to transmit information. Mistakes have been done, but we shouldn't put it all in one thing. I think that's the worst case scenario. I mean, it's always the anecdote about the Biblioteca Escarel in Madrid, where they had this huge fire and they tried to save all their precious books. So they always put the most precious one. They put them all in one place and put wet blankets over it, and then they start putting out the fire. They were able to put out the fire, but the problem is the blanket wasn't wet enough. It caught fire, and all their most precious books were burnt. What we still have in the library Escarel is the books the people didn't deem worth of saving. And they have some water damage, and maybe they're still a bit moist, but we still have them. Yeah. The best way of surviving of information is distribution of information, always. Yeah. So, any question, or should we end it here?
I think it was a good time to end.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much, and hopefully see you in the other talks as well.